I am the managing director of continuous improvement for Catalyst Connection, and that's a part of the MEP system. What is change, right? In today's environment, it's crazy. Change every day. In order for us to go through change, we have to understand it's actually a process. Right? It doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. When you want to talk about transformational change, you're talking years, not weeks and months. Basically, the difference between what we are doing today, what we want to be doing in the future. Part of that process is helping people accept new ways of working or how that change gets done. So why is it so hard? We need to understand why change is grueling and recognize that it is hard. The only way to get through it is practice change. Your brain reacts to that energy consumption because, again, its sole purpose is to survive. Your body basically doses you with two types of chemicals to help you stop thinking, right? And those two chemicals are adrenaline and glutamate. And that comes from two different, glands in the body that physically and emotionally make you feel anxious, uncomfortable, awkward, physically drained, tired, in an effort for you to stop thinking. So you have to push through the conflict until it becomes natural to you. You have to think and practice change every day until it becomes natural. Now, I always use the toothpaste as a kind of a qualifier to help people understand what I'm talking about. And I always ask the question when I'm in groups of people, and I ask them, why do you put water on your toothbrush? And the answer is, it becomes more foamy, or it's smoother, or the bristles get softer, or whatever the reasons. But if you really think about and try to figure out why do I put water on my toothbrush, it always boils down to, well, that's what my mom eventually taught me. And I ask who taught mom and then who taught grandma. And it stops in the early 1900s where there was no such thing as toothpaste. It was tooth powder. And back then they had to use water with their brush in order to create a paste. So the only reason that we today use water before we put our toothpaste on our toothbrush is because it's a habit that was formed in the early 1900s from our great grandmothers, and we just taught each other the whole way through the decades. So I always ask the group, try not to use water on your toothbrush. And the reason why I do that is that forces you into discovery mode, because before you go to brush your teeth, you have to think about not putting water in your toothbrush. Then you start feeling uncomfortable, right? And then you start brushing without water, and people really have almost a visceral reaction to it. It's just something they're not used to. And I always say, if you're able to practice something that personal to you, like brushing your teeth, and getting your brain used to waking up, then potentially the thought would be you should be able to do that in other aspects of your life. When real change comes at you, your brain's back in discovery mode because you're trying to challenge it every day, keep it thinking instead of being in that cruise control. Laws of acceptance. There's all kind of different models out there, and I just use this 5 adopter types. It's pretty straightforward, right? The innovators, those are the first people to come on board. You have your early majority, which is almost over half of the staff. And then you have your late majority. Those are the people that are just kind of observing change, and they'll get on board eventually. Then the laggers, or what a good colleague of mine calls them, cavemen, or citizens against virtually everything. As you go through change and you're trying to be that change agent, you have to understand how the acceptance is with the people that go through it. So if we had a way to help us through that change, I would unfreeze what things are doing. And basically, this is the emotional part, the preparation for change, getting people on board, communicating on what's happening. Then once you have that done, then you execute the change. And that's where the practice of the change comes in. And then once everything becomes a new normal, then we kind of refreeze everything, standardize it. And that way the change can sustain itself. For the unfreezing, I've been using the SCARF model, right? It helps, it's the 5 factors to help interpersonal relationships, right? And basically what the SCARF is saying is people have to have certain feelings, certain securities on how they are viewed in the organization in order for them to feel comfortable enough. So here's a little diagram of what I'm trying to get to. So your status is basically what's your professional position at work. Threats that come from that is if you were questioning legitimacy of someone, or like you always say, hey, you're not my boss, we're just team members, right? How do you influence without authority? And then how do you reaffirm someone's authority in that project? Certainty, right? What is assumed to be sure or predictable. So a threat to someone like that wants certainty would be you're questioning any of their thoughts or their assumptions, their perceptions, their experiences, instead of agreeing with their assumptions or asking them deepening questions. Autonomy is those degrees of freedom. So, if you have a team member that makes a decision about a change, you question that ability or you question those decisions. So it's just basically you respect people's decisions, and even if you know the failure may occur, you allow that learning to happen. Relatedness, like, do I belong, right? If people don't feel like they belong into the change or into the organization, it's going to be a negative effect. And then fairness, and it's not necessarily treating everyone the same, it's the perception of, right? The perception of justice. So basically, part of that perception is you have to treat everyone the same and then justify how that happens, right? And then basically, you have to make sure that as you follow these 5 steps of the SCARF model, that people are involved, that they are treated fairly, they're related, and they have some type of autonomy or power to make decisions on how they move through their process of change, right? Bottom line is any kind of change is risky when you're comfortable with the status quo, right? And then we all know this one. Sometimes we have difficulty incorporating new changes because we tend to do things that make us feel good or secure. So if a change starts occurring and our bodies and our brains start dosing us with these chemicals, we don't have that comfortable, secure feeling anymore. So that's why we have to make sure that, we have to support the people we go through. If employees feel fear, uncomfortable, or unsafe, you can tell them all you want how, hey, it's okay, things will work out. Their brain absolutely cannot hear you, right? So that's part of that SCARF model. So basically is if we aren't helping people feel comfortable, if we aren't helping them get over their fear of change or whatever's happening, the improvement's going to fail, right? And there is a statistics of 70 to 90% of all improvement efforts fail, and that's because we don't deal with the people aspect up front, and we don't try to really help them through that change when it comes to what we have to do, right? So you need to get over that anxiety. In order to get over the anxiety, I come up with SIP, right? Sustaining improvements in processes. And it's basically somewhat of a roadmap or a how to help people through change. And then basically the thought process is once you practice change enough, you'll create new neural pathways. And then these new ways of thinking, these new habits of I'm constantly looking at improvement, that'll become your new habit. And it could be something as easy as, hey, today I'm going to put my screwdriver on the workbench to the left. That didn't work out right. And tomorrow I'm going to put it on the right. And if you're able just to help people get back to that discovery mode, just figuring things out as they come, that's the greatest benefit of anyone can do for that organizational change, right? Guided by the 5 social factors of SCARF. So my 5-step method is step 1, determine the current status, and that's just basically where are you at now that is creating dissatisfaction. So an example might be, you would say, hey, last month we were 10,000 short on sales. Okay, and we need to make it up this month. So what would happen then is, everyone would, through brute force, overtime, whatever it would take, they would make that 10,000 up. And at the end of next month, it's like, yep, we made it. And then my question always is, well, are you going to be able to maintain or sustain that level? And the answer is always no, because we're able to get to the metrics. We're able to meet our metrics through all those different ways. So that's what most people practice or change. They change for the metric. And what I want everyone to try to look at it differently is, instead of trying to get the metric, why don't you try to overcome the first obstacle that's in front of you, right? There could be, three, four, a dozen obstacles to your, 3-week target. So if you work on the obstacles and not have that target or desired state out there and only work on obstacles, you'll see like these problems get solved much better, because once you overcome the obstacle, or another word for problem, then you'll get closer to your target, and the things that were holding you back previously are now kind of taken care of. So you list out the obstacles. The next step is the test, the trials, the experiments, or whatever you need to overcome those obstacles. And I use this statement almost every day, because people are like, "Oh, we'll get to where we want to go, and here's our implementation plan. Here's the 9, 10, 12 things we're going to do to get to our target." And I always like to share with them. I'm like, well, if you have an implementation plan, you say if you do these 9 things, you'll get there. You would already be there, right? So if you already knew how to get there, you would already be there, and you're not there yet. So we got to just realize that, we have to run some tests and trials in order for us to get there. And every time that a test and trial is completed, your direction might change. An implementation plan shows I go from point A to point B in a straight line, where if you take one step at a time, overcome a single obstacle, you're kind of at a different current condition now. Your current state is different because you've changed the process, you changed the system somehow through that test or trial. So that's why we always try to push saying, one trial at a time, overcome the obstacles, or this is also known as scientific method of learning or scientific thinking, right? So those are the 5 steps that I come up with for how to help people through change by overcoming obstacles that are preventing them to get to whatever desired state they need to go to. Step one, management has to be committed to the change. Absolutely, you got to be supporting it in any way, shape, or form, especially those middle managers, those frontline managers. But if your organization's like, yeah, we don't want to change, I don't. I'm sorry, but I don't believe I have an answer for that question. like I said, if I did, I'd be a billionaire by now. You're saying focus on the people that would maybe sabotage the change.
Right. So somebody's asking a question, and unfortunately, I'm not. I'm reading them as I'm seeing them. So,
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah,
is
yeah.
a good approach to enable change when completing a Kaizen with 8 people from an organization of 100? How does one message and get the buy-in? You can't host everybody at the event. How do you get them to buy in? So, okay, basically, you're trying to drive change with
Right.
8 people in an event, but there's 100 people in the organization. So,
Mhm.
how do you get everybody to buy into whatever you're trying to do?
So in that exact scenario, I mean, I look at it this way: if you're being 8 people in an organization of 100 and change, those might be your innovators and change. Communicate, communicate, communicate always. So those other 90 people or whatever it is, this is the first step in the process, because you're not going to have a sweeping change and say, oh, the organization is totally different overnight. It's just one step and one part of being changed in a kind of an improvement organization. Everyone's going to get their chance to participate. Also it is make sure that they have that sense of belonging no matter what.
Sure, sure. Okay. A lot here about information, leveraging opinion leaders. And, whenever I'm trying to pick people to run a Kaizen event, I always tell the client company, I want people who are leaders. I don't care what their title is. I want the people whose opinions other people follow or pay attention to. They're the ones I want. I don't want the person who's into it but quiet, right? Not when we're trying to drive change. It can
But
be easy.
the biggest thing for supervisors is to say, hey, we need to make a change and I don't know how. Right? And work with the process owners, the value adders in the system, and say, what do you think? Even if you approach it that way, get the ownership, the buy-in, the sustainment will come when you involve the process owners in the change fully.
Yeah, sure. I think that's pretty interesting. So the one thing that we should probably talk a little bit about is, for me, the with them, right? You have to answer the with them for folks.
Yeah,
What
what's
do
in it for
they
me?
need?
Yeah.
Why should I buy into this change? Sometimes that can be difficult. I mean, to really come up with a reason, especially if somebody, we'll call it, loses in the change. Somebody has to do more work than they did before. That's sort of a tough sell sometimes.
Yeah, you're just getting into lean tool implementation there, right? Yeah, I mean, as long as you can show them what's in it for me. So what I started doing recently is, I walk in and say, "Hey, I'm Eric. Nice to meet you." And usually people ask me, "Why are you here, Eric? What are you going to do?" And as the more I thought about it, I tell the classes, "I'm here so that you have a better drive home." And people are like, "What are you talking about?" Like, well, if we implement changes or we improve processes or whatever it does, you're going to be less stressed and you'll have a better drive home. And if you have a better drive home, better night, you come in next day, better mood, it kind of perpetuates itself. So what's in it for me is my goal as a facilitator is to make sure you have a better drive home. So that's what I always use. I'm here to make your day just less stressful. And that seems to work pretty well.
Sure, absolutely. I think another thing too, when you're in one of these situations, you're trying to get people to buy in. I'm
Hmm.
a big believer in 5-minute meetings with Gemba boards, right? In terms of
Yeah.
you're not meeting every day, you're at least doing it several times a week. Problems don't stay buried, they surface quickly.
A lot of the lean tools that we used in the past have a negative connotation to them anymore, right? Because we as lean facilitators didn't do the greatest job 20 years ago, right? It was all about the tools, didn't really focus on the people or the process, those type of things, right? So, they use storyboards. Hey, I'm just telling you a story, right? The storyboards are great because those are the process owners. Those are the people that are going to be performing those experiments or tests in order to make those changes move forward. What a better place to document those trials than on a storyboard or your Gemba boards.
Yeah, sure. I mean, to me, the difference is that storyboards are for projects and Gemma boards for areas, right?
Yeah.
Describing areas. So, yeah, it's just, I mean, I've got all sorts of thoughts about that, how to sustain improvement. This idea of working on the business versus working in the business, and how do you know
Mhm.
when you're doing
Yeah.
just a lot of discussions that we probably don't have time for. But this whole sustaining thing has really been on my mind because you're right. If it were just about tools, then it would be simple. But 5S is still a hot topic every day, and yet the principles are well known. So there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
What about the feeling when people say, "I'm too busy to do lean"? What do you say to them?
So we just had a really long discussion at lunch about that today, actually. Right? We expect people to take 15 minutes to update their boards, and then they have to perform a trial or an experiment, and you start looking at an hour a day just to determine some continuous improvement thing. But you still need to catch that little slice of the pie going towards continuous improvement. So I say, everyone keeps saying daily practice, which absolutely is the best way to create the habits quicker. I'm saying a couple times a week, have that coaching session or that follow up on how did that experiment go? What did you learn? What are you going to try next to overcome the obstacle? So that, and then, yeah, you're going to have to spend a little more time up front. So I always say, what time's your shift end? Oh, 3 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock, you start getting ready before you leave. And then, there's always time in the day for these small little improvements. They're there. We just have to, capitalize on them. And so maybe I don't spend that extra 5 minutes on break with my buddy talking about what beers we're drinking this weekend and go run a real quick trial on the system or things like that. But the time is there, and I understand people get wrapped up. That's why I'm not a big pusher of, oh, it has to be done daily. It's like, you know what, you do twice a week, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Sure. Especially if the frequency before was 0 times per week.
Zero, right? Exactly. Yeah, but once a week
So
isn't enough. Once a week, it turns into projects, right? But if you're doing it two to
it's an
three
update
times,
meeting. Yeah.
two minimum, 3 times, for me, 3 times is max. As long as you're doing that, you're trying something, you're moving, you're learning, you're discovering, then we'll get there.
Well, that's one of the things I really like too about the Paul Akers 2-second lean approach. And for
Yeah.
anybody who doesn't know, it's where he asks his people to provide one improvement worth 2 seconds of time every day. I like that because people are really thinking about stuff. And it's not like, well, nobody's complaining about what I'm doing, but I see a way to make it better. And that desire is inside. I love that.
Yep. I'm
So,
trying to chat here. So,
oh, yeah, a lot of interesting stuff going on there. And
yeah.
it's funny too. I had to laugh because somebody was talking to the black hats. That came from
Yeah.
JCI Six Sigma, which I'm imagining is John Costanza's institute,
Yeah.
which
I mean, I've
was
heard
dealing
of
with
the
them
whole,
years ago, and
yeah, it was
I
like
know
red
that came
hat
from
was for emergencies and, different color hats were you meant for different things. Johnson Controls is the answer is what's that?
Johnson Controls. Okay, well, yeah, it was like a great story in my head anyway. The connections from years ago, but in any event, that's it's a lot of things. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm a Six Sigma guy, right? I'm a master black belt. I teach black belts, but to
Hmm.
me, that's all well and good. But if nobody buys in, or if you don't connect at a process level, that's what I'm finding right now. Is that most people who want green belt classes to solve problems really need to start at a more fundamental level with teams and being
Yeah.
before they get into collecting data and trying to determine root causes that way. And I like what you said too, by the way, about not having outcome based goals. I'm
Yeah.
not reducing cycle time by 10%. What I am
Nope.
doing will help cycle time, but we're not there yet. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
that's a tough one. I mean, how do you handle that? How do you convince people? I mean, I've had people say, oh, 5S, that's not a big deal. Let's do the cellular thing.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
cart before the horse, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So thoughts on that? I mean, how do you tell people that it's about the process and it's about people first? It's about people first, and then it's about process, and then it's about data.
So I start breaking it down into the different types of monitoring. So there's outcome metrics, and I'll use American football as the example. So the outcome metric is the score of the game. It's the scoreboard, right? At the end of the day, did we win or lose, right? And when you're looking at the scoreboard, nothing you say or nothing you do is going to change it. That's the score. It's over, right? So the outcome metrics, those are the lagging indicators, right?
Right.
The process metrics is your ability to see how you're doing while the game is being played. So that might be, did I get a first down? Or, how many yards did we get on that play? Right. So those are process metrics, right? And the thing is, if I get 4 yards every play, you would think I'm going to win the game, right? Because, I get a first down every 3 downs. Eventually, you're going to win the game. So the last one, and this is where I kind of live, is what's your process characteristics? And that would be, I play a nickel or dime defense, or do I run or pass the ball? If you change your characteristics, good or bad, it doesn't matter. Your process metric will change, and then your outcome metric eventually will change. So it's not about changing metrics or doing things to meet a metrics. You change your characteristics, the how. What are you doing right now? No matter what you do, if you change something in that process characteristics, the process metric will change, and eventually the outcome metric will change. So, and most times it changes the better in business, right? If you're making a change, you're making a change for the better. And you fail, and then you really learn. I always use, like, how do you know if a stove is hot? It's a serious question. How do you know that?
Well, presumably, I mean, you can touch it and find out,
You've
right?
been burned, right? I mean, that if I touch a hot stove, I get burned. So I always say you have to burn in order for you to learn, right? So even if it is a failure, you at least learn something from it.
I think you actually learn more from what didn't work
I,
than what
I
did.
know. I'm like, fail often, right? Just, and us as like managers, supervisors, you could have a process owner say, hey, I want to try this. And you're saying, oh, like, oh my God, they're so bad. I'm like, oh, great idea. Give it a try. See what happens. They're going to fail, but you got to allow them. That
Oh,
failure will
fail
actually make
cheap.
them
Yeah,
better. Yeah.
you probably know that one. I tell people some companies it's like try Zen. You know what, guys? Nobody knows what's going to happen. Let's go try it. Let's stop. Let's
Yeah.
get out of conference room. Let's stop talking about it and let's go try it.
Yep.
Drives
Just
me
try it. See what
crazy.
happens.
Those I call conference room kaizens because we sit around and speculate about like the sources of
Yeah.
problems. Go
Yep.
ask people. Just go ask them. They'll tell you. They're dying to. Okay.